Hello. My name is Connell. I don't exactly know how to start these kinds of videos. This is my first time doing something like this. I often talk to myself or have conversations with friends and things like that and think, hey, maybe I could make a video about this. That sounds fun. So I often write about things that I'm thinking about too. And so I have a lot of things that I could write about. Um, and I didn't particularly know a topic to start with, but I thought that this one was just something that I was currently thinking about, but it doesn't mean that it's the only thing. I have a lot of other stuff that I'd like to talk about. So if anybody sees this, I'd very much like feedback on any problems. This is very scuffed. My camera, it's a very nice camera, but it's on top of a like a chess set. My microphone, I don't know if it sounds super good. If anybody knows anything about that, I'd also like some help. But anyways, this video, I want to talk about the depictions of heaven and hell within different religions and then also within media. So I have a few separate examples that I'll talk about. Um, Particularly, we're going to talk about the major religions that I think of usually, the ones that I know the most about. So I'm going to leave out some things that some people might not like. Um, I'm sorry about that. But first of all, I want to get an idea of what heaven and hell mainly are seen as. Heaven is like it's a good place. You know, it's where you go after you die. It's eternal goodness. I don't have a word for that, and I don't have anything well written down. It just says um, good afterlife for those who were good with throughout life, which is true. Um, it's usually eternal, and then hell is the bad place. It's where you go if you're bad throughout your life, and it is also usually associated with some form of like torture or damnation. It isn't always, and I'll be talking about that today. You can get out of it sometimes, sometimes you can't. It's a little different. So first of all, we'll talk about depictions of heaven within religions. So first off, I wrote down Christianity. It was the easiest to write about because I have a lot of friends who are Christian, and just I'm not religious in any way. This video isn't meant to pick fun at any particular religion. It's not meant to make any religion look better. I just have a lot of interest in things like this, and I like writing about it, which is most of the reason why I chose this topic because I know I have a lot of information on it, and I thought it would be fun. So Christianity. Um, First thing I wrote down is how you get there. It when you die, if you were good or bad, you get sent to either heaven or hell. In this case, it would be heaven. But Christianity also ties the belief of God to it. So if you don't believe in God, you will be sent to hell. If you do believe in God, you'll be sent to heaven. And that's a big thing. It's not always good or bad, it's just the belief in God itself. Heaven in the Christian Bible, so what is actually written down is the the place with God. Not necessarily a good place or a bad place. It's just a place that God is at. So while most people will view it as a good or bad place within Christianity, that's not technically what is written down. Um, Meaning that the good part about it is that God is there, but it isn't inherently good. If you view God as good, that would make it good, but God is just there, and that's really all that heaven is categorized as. Next, I have Islam. Um, the most one of the most popular religions. Obviously, it's a really easy one to talk about. I have a lot of information on this. I think that over the years, it's become a lot more popular and common for people to be comfortable talking about this kind of thing with people and to the public, and I think that's a really great thing that people are able to share their culture. Um, in Islam, heaven it's called Jannah. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I put it I looked at the video of somebody saying it to make sure that I tried to do it right. But Islam, you get there also by faith in Allah or God, but it is also a lot more associated with actually good, righteous actions, meaning that it's not just the belief. Christianity is a lot more tied to the actual belief of God rather than the sins or virtues committed within your life. Um, it's a comforting place. It's abundant. It's beautiful. There's no pain, sadness, or injustice, so it is a good place free of any bad thing, whether that be actually bad things like physical pain, but also like mental issues. And your desires are fulfilled, which is a very common thing that people believe in Christianity, but a lot of the time, Christianity, what people think is Christianity, is actually Islam. Christianity is really only tied to the belief of God. Um, Again, Islam also follows a lot more of the ideals of it being good because Allah is there. So but it is still a good place. It is just that it is even greater because of the presence of Allah. And then next I have Buddhism, and I wrote about Buddhism because I feel like Buddhism follows a lot of these central ideas, but it's unique. It's not the same thing. My mom knows a lot about Buddhism, so I spoke to her quite a bit about it. Um, and I also know quite a bit about Buddhism. It's something that I learned about quite a lot in school, uh, and it's pretty interesting. So you get there by being wise, training through mental discipline and ethical conduct. Uh, Heaven in Buddhism is usually a final resting place associated with reaching nirvana, end of suffering, end of desire, end of anything, and it's the escape from the cycle of rebirth. Because in Buddhism, you are reborn and born again until you reach nirvana. So when you die and you haven't reached nirvana, you'll be sent to hell in that case, which I'll talk about later. So it's good because the idea of suffering and desire is eliminated. I think that's kind of weird. I kind of want to desire things. I don't know. Um I don't know why I said that. Anyways, it's you achieve inner peace and freedom, and you can do whatever you want, but in that same case, you lose the freedom of desire, which is kind of what I meant when I said that. I didn't mean for it to sound weird or anything like that. I apologize. But now I have key patterns between them. So all of them are good places, like are associated with good things. That's a very obvious thing. That's exactly what they are. However, Christianity and Islam deal a lot more with a first of all, that's where you go when you die and you stay there, but it's also a lot more connected with the God himself. Um that being God and Jesus and Allah. Whereas Buddhism doesn't really associate itself with the God Buddha himself. It is more just the person working in their own brain. Um, so Christianity is good because of God. Islam is good because it's a great place. And Buddhism is good because you're free from desires. But Buddhism has that idea of reincarnation until you have reached nirvana. So Christianity and Islam have always been very similar. People are just racist, to be honest, most of the time. Buddhism is older, but it still exists and it's very unique. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, to talk about different ways that it is viewed. So now I have depictions of heaven within media, and this is where the conversation got brought up. Why I started talking about it. Um, has been a hotel, which is a show that not a lot of people like. I don't particularly like it myself. I've seen it. I haven't seen season two. It's fine. It's a little weird. I'm not going to judge anybody for having watched it, but I thought that it had a very unique idea of viewing heaven and hell, and I thought that that was really interesting. And so Hazbin Hotel is one thing that I've listed here. In Hazbin Hotel, anybody who has sinned goes to hell. That is like very clearly shown. There are characters that aren't that bad that are in hell, characters who did very minimal things, but because of that were sent to hell. And so not a lot of people are in heaven. The premise centers upon, like, the premise of the show is whether you can redeem yourself based off of those. And like I said, I don't know anything about season two, so this is all I know about season one. But there's also a song where the main characters go to heaven and they sing a song and they say, quote, "People are happy that they died because here we got no worries, got no burglaries, no strife." So it is a perfect place with perfect people. And it almost, in a way, seems like it is a perfect place because perfect people are there, not necessarily because it is a good place itself, which is something that I'll get a lot more into when I talk about hell in Hazbin Hotel, because obviously that's what the show's about. So now it's a weird switch up, but I put Coco. Um, I wanted to talk about Catholicism, but I didn't talk about Catholicism just because I didn't want to make anything too long. But so I put Coco here because I watched Coco recently. So it's just something that I was thinking about of how it has a unique afterlife. Now, first of all, with Coco, there's not a distinct way that you get there. You kind of just do go there when you die. Um, the goodness, I guess, in Coco's case, being good is staying remembered, leaving a lasting impact to the point where people remember you so that you, when you die, you stay alive in the realm, in the land of the living. I no, I think that's a different movie. Anyways, Coco is it's a beautiful land of the dead. It's a beautiful, great place. It's vibrant. It's not a super bad place. We do see signs of poverty, but not necessarily super negatively. I it is a kids movie, so I don't know how trusting that is, but it's a place that everyone goes, but you stay there based on being remembered. Which kind of ties into its existence within the real world, how if you don't really exist in the real world because nobody remembers you, how are you going to exist at all if there's no people that remember your existence? Um, Key patterns. Um, First of all, they've different entry systems. Afterlife is judgment based and has been hotel, so you go based off of committing sins and things like that. Coco, you just go to the afterlife. Um, the starting point is the afterlife, and only after you die, you will end up going somewhere else, which I'll talk about later. Um, Husband Hotel is also a lot more independent of other people, which isn't really something that you think about a lot. But Coco, that's the entire idea of Coco, is that other people are controlling you being alive. Whereas in Has Been Hotel, you kind of show up, you literally lose your memory in Has Been Hotel. So people don't remember what they did, which is why it's a lot more confusing too. If people don't know what they did, but they are very normal people, it's very different to look at. So, um, but the overall takeaway is that it's always a good place. It's usually eternal, except for Buddhism, obviously, and it relies on how good you are during your life, except for Coco, obviously. So there are going to be exceptions, but that is the general idea of heaven or whatever you want to call it, the afterlife. Now, my face turned red. I have notes, but not like super hard written things, and I colored the slides because I like doing that. But I have the depictions of hell within religion. first. So it's the same three and then the same two pieces of media. So Christianity, how you get there is not believing in God, um, unrepented sins. So Christianity, like I said earlier, is more tied to the actual belief of God rather than the actual things you did within your life. Which means that Christianity, heaven is more of a place that doesn't have God. That doesn't make it inherently bad. The reason that it is bad is because God isn't there. The same way that heaven is good because God is there. But there's nothing that necessarily says if hell is a bad place. It just says that it is bad because God isn't there. And that's probably something that Christians believe, but that's a little confusing for somebody like me. But it's an eternal separation from God. It is often depicted negatively, but not technically in the Bible. It is never mentioned like that. It is just a place without God. Um, Generally, that just means that it has less people watching over it, meaning that it's probably mostly a bad place because of the people in it, because they are not being, I don't want to say forced, but they're not being, what's the word? I can't think of it. Influenced by a higher power. They're just there living within their own. Islam is incredibly similar. However, in Islam, it is a negative place. Hell is a bad place. So the disbelief in Allah and then actual wrongdoing, obviously, it's a lot more tied to the wrongdoings that you committed in your life as opposed to just the disbelief of Allah. But it is Jahannam. That's how it's pronounced. I'm very certain that that's how that one is pronounced. It is physical punishment, different levels depending on the severity. But the difference here is that some may leave, some may redeem themselves and can be able to go to heaven or Jannah. And so it's distinctly different in that regard, where you have the ability to redeem yourself within the afterlife, which is pretty cool. um, so again, judgment and punishment is based off of the crimes and sins you committed within your life, but those can be redeemed, which is very interesting. And then Buddhism, I didn't talk about this before, but Buddhism deals with karma, which is where a lot of the things that people say nowadays comes from. Um, Harmful acts, hatred, and ignorance is typically what it goes for. So again, sins, but it also has a lot more to do with mental ideas. If you die with hatred, you will not go um, to heaven. So you go to hell. Um, Having this is intense suffering, but not eternal. You will be reborn, but it's meant to teach you, I guess, to be reborn. So you are tortured and then reborn to hopefully reach nirvana within that new life of yours because you were taught that it was a bad thing. And that cycle repeats until you reach nirvana, where then you live in peace. So Christianity is rejection of God, Islam is disbelief in moral deeds, and Buddhism is negative karma. So Christianity and Islam are both judgment based and a lot more based off of the belief within the God. Buddhism is strictly based off of one's own doing. So Christianity and Islam deal a lot more with the actual celestial being, I guess, whereas Buddhism rarely mentions it and it's more just to talk about the person. In Christianity, hell is eternal. In Islam, it can be temporary or eternal. You can move between the levels, up and down, depending on what you do in your afterlife. And Buddhism, Hell is always temporary, meaning that you will keep repeating the cycle until you have reached nirvana, but by technicality it is meant to be temporary. Now I have depictions of hell within the media. And this is where we'll get into Has Been Hotel. Um, most people end up in hell. So a lot of the theme of the show is that heaven hasn't very clearly understood what is a sin and what isn't, what is bad enough to get you into hell. So most people are in hell, meaning that there aren't a lot of people in heaven. Um, Hell is it's overpopulated, chaotic, violent, but it isn't inherently bad, and that's the reason that I feel so interested in the way that they depict it. Has Been Hotel isn't doesn't depict hell or heaven as good and bad places. They are good and bad because of the people that get sent there. Meaning that hell started off as a normal place and then a bunch of bad people got sent there and it turned out being bad. Obviously, I'm leaving out the extermination in this sense because there is the extermination where a bunch of people get killed. That is really bad, but that's different in this sense. I'm leaving that out purposely. Um, you're constantly in danger, and there is not a path to redemption, which is a part of the story. But I'm talking about before that. And so most of the suffering comes from the people and the environment that people have created, not necessarily how it already was. Um, Now, Coco. Coco does not have a traditional hell. It has a final death. So it's you die when you are forgotten. Um, I'd like to believe it's the idea of not having left a lasting impact, so you are forgotten. That is up to interpretation, I suppose. Um, it's not a place, it's more of an erasure of existence. Kind of the idea that if nobody knows that you exist in the mortal realm, how can you exist past that? Um, so as far as we know, you no longer exist. You are poof gone. It's a terrifying concept, but that's what I'm writing about. Um, so obviously there are a lot of differences between those two specific ones. It's a physical place in Has Been Hotel of chaos and suffering because of the people that have been put there. Coco isn't an existent place. Hell is more just like being erased. It's not really hell. It's just what happens after the afterlife. Um, so when we look at overall ideas of everything, hell is generally something that you suffer in. Not always. In Christianity, it's just because God isn't there. But the idea is that because God isn't there, you will suffer. Um, so it's absent of anything good. It's a state you're meant to avoid through correct living, which is kind of why religions exist, saying that you have to be good now or else you won't get into a good part of the afterlife. Um, so a lot of the ideas stay the same to what most people believe, but it is very different. Like certain religions are a lot different than what most people believe because it is really interesting to look at those things. Most people look at Christianity and think of other versions of Christianity. So not necessarily Christianity, the Christian Bible is written the way that I described Christianity, but there are other ways that people interpret it through other religions. But a lot of the time it ends up being a lot more similar to Islam, which is really interesting to look at. Buddhism is very unique, and of course not a lot of people are Buddhist, especially anybody who would be seeing this. I just wanted to look at something that's a lot more unique, to see something that is clearly different. And then the media that I chose, Has Been Hotel was what sparked the conversation, and Coco was just a random one. I know both were very random choices, but it's what I wanted to talk about. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Again, I'd like criticism if you have any. I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. My microphone sounds weird. That's the main thing, to be honest. My camera's scuffed, but I think the angle's fine. Um, any any feedback will do. Any constructive criticism, I can take it. Hate might be a little annoying, but whatever. So, anyways, um, guess I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll make another one of these. This is actually really fun. I kind of got a little away from even looking at the notes, so I got really into it, which I'm happy about. So, anyways, um, bye.